Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Melted Wax Podcast. I'm your host, DPZ, and I have with me a friend, a guy I only sell through now. He is awesome, and we're going to talk about his journey, but more importantly, we're going to talk about rare cards that don't sell very often. We're going to talk about a part of our hobby community that I believe is vibrant and growing. With me, I have Nick from at the Wharf Sports Cards. That's his Instagram handle, and he consigns on PWCC. No recent comps. I can keep going. Nick, thank you for joining me today.
Of course, man. I'm excited to hop on. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So first thing I want to ask, and we'll talk all about what you do now, because I think a lot of folks know about what you've been doing. You've got a lot of followers, a lot of traction. You got a really, really cool market cornered for our hobby. And I think there's a lot of people that are navigating and gravitating towards that part of the hobby because it's fun and it's exciting, and you don't have to spend a ton of money either. I think it's a very affordable way to hobby and still get really, really cool cards. But before we jump into all of that, I want to learn more about, and folks, we didn't have a whole lot of it wasn't this big conversation we had beforehand. I kind of wanted to react to all this stuff on live on the show. I want to learn about Nick, where he came from, his hobby experience, his hobby journey, his origin story, whatever you want to call it. So Nick, why don't you just walk us through like everything, like start from the very beginning and bring us up to where we are today.
Sure, man. Yeah, I live in Illinois, Quincy, Illinois. Whenever I say Illinois, people assume Chicago. I'm like 5 hours from Chicago. So I'm actually closer to St. Louis, Missouri than I am Chicago, Illinois. So, raised here, moved away for a little while, came back. But my collecting journey, I have kind of the classic story where I collected as a kid growing up. I grew up in the 90s in Illinois. So I was a Chicago Bulls fan. I was a Jordan fan. I was never really chasing the super rare cards. I just wanted Jordan cards. Like I was just wanting to get packs from the store and find Chicago Bulls cards. If it was a Jordan card, even better. I was filling binders, organizing my binders by player, alphabetical by player name, team, all that good stuff. Like that's what I enjoyed when I was a kid. Kind of got out of it when I was, say, probably late junior high, maybe early high school. Through, I was probably out of it for 10 to 12 years, probably from 2000 to 2012-ish, I would say. High school, college, girls, no money, all that fun stuff, right? You know the drill.
Yeah.
2012, I got back into it. I'm a Redskins fan, or a Commanders fan, I guess. So 2012, with RG3 being drafted, I really wanted some extra juice in the game with my Redskins. So I started looking at RG3 cards and just cards in general, and realized everything had changed. It was all totally different, right? We're looking at patch autos. I'd never heard of a patch auto card, back in the 90s. So it was all new to me, but I was excited. So I got back into it in 2012, kind of dabbled for a few years, and really 2017 is probably when I got back in for good and really got serious about it again. And been in it ever since. And was fortunate enough to build a business out of it, and here we are today.
Wow. So did the boom help you reignite that in a way? Like, were you one of those people that kind of went, whoa, cards again?
Yeah. So I was in it a little bit before that. Like I said, around 2017 is kind of when I got back into it, really seriously and consistently. So I was in it again before the boom. I was teaching and coaching at the high school level. So I was at a public school teaching and coaching high school basketball. I was doing cards on the side, and I was kind of building a little collection, but honestly, I was just kind of doing the flip thing on the side. It was fun to me to, teachers don't make a whole lot of money. So it was fun to me to make an extra couple grand on the side, buying and selling sports cards and kind of prospecting on younger players, kind of like everybody's doing now. But so the boom happened, really 2020. I was kind of building up my bankroll to try to make a move to go into cards full time. But the COVID thing accelerated it. So in 2020, I think it was March, us teachers got sent home for COVID, right? I never went back for that school year. So I was fortunate enough to have a paycheck for, 6 months without actually going to work. So I kind of had that financial security blanket there to be able to go into cards more full time and try things on the business side and see if I can make it work without really having to quit my job. Right. So
Nice.
what I started doing was actually running story sales on Instagram, because I noticed people would post cards on their Instagram for sale on their stories. And again, this was 2020. So Instagram's way bigger now than it was then for cards, especially. But it was super unorganized. People would post up on their story and it was super unorganized. It was kind of messy. It was hard to really, keep track of these things people were posting. So I said, what if I just create a super clean and organized and scheduled Instagram story sale? And then that kind of took off. People really liked it. And I started doing consignments for Instagram story sales. Not really scalable, super hard to do at volume. So I took it to eBay. So this all happened within like 6 months. And before I knew it, I had an eBay consignment business rolling. Did that for a couple years. Had a kid during that. Was pregnant with our second. Decided I needed a little bit more time on my hands. So I took a job with PWCC. Did that for a year. And when they were bought out by Fanatics, I decided I wanted to get back to doing my own thing. And that was in July of 2023. And then, here we are today, kind of niching down into the no recent comps sector and trying to make a business out of that. Awesome.
So yeah, there's been a lot of shifts and changes, a lot of pivots, popular word these days, pivot, right?
For sure.
So you've worked up to this point, and why no recent comps? What gets you, why make that move? What makes you excited about no recent comps? Mm-hmm. What was the impetus behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the last 4 years I've been doing consignments in some capacity. Even with PWCC, I was bringing cards in for consignment. So for the last 4 years, I've been able to, help people sell maybe 1 million plus cards at this point. I don't know, definitely hundreds of thousands of cards. So I've been, blessed to see a ton of different cards, so many very cool cards, but a lot of the cards were the same cards over and over. It's just, people are selling those cards more often. And it was getting a little stale for me, honestly. It was getting to the point where I was kind of getting tired of seeing and dealing with the same cards over and over. And whenever I would get a card in of a player that, I had nostalgia for and a card that I hadn't seen, I would get super excited. I would take time to really dig into that card, look at the sales history, look at the pop reports, look for articles on that card, look at forums to see if people were talking about that card, just to learn as much as I could about that card. I would get excited about it and I'd want to know more. And I found myself doing that more and more. And I noticed that, the auction houses, the consigners, they were all really focusing on the same cards as well. I mean, they were all getting great cards, but it was like the same cards were selling over and over between auction houses. And I thought, I think people would get excited about these cards that are not being seen very often. Like if they could get some exposure, I think people would get excited about that. So I started to do a little content on that when I left PWCC. I knew I wanted to approach, kind of that segment of cards. And people were really liking the content. So I tried a few different things, business wise, offerings wise, but I think I've landed in a place that I'm excited about. And I think there's potential in, and I think other people will get excited about too, but it's all around, what I call no recent comps, which is basically cards that haven't sold for at least 6 months, but the longer it's been since they've sold, the better for me. So it's just, those are the type of cards that get me excited. And I've noticed a lot of other people are getting excited about those cards as well.
So how do you differentiate, Nick, between, because people will say, well, sometimes cards don't sell for a long time because there's no demand for them and there's no reason to sell them, or there's no incentive to sell them. So how do you differentiate between a card that's viable for that no recent comp highlight or conversation versus a card that's just randomly selling. And I'm not talking about random, common player that we don't, but Hall of Famers, important players. But how do you differentiate with the cards that are, what makes them important enough to land on your radar?
Yeah, that's a great question, honestly. And for me, it usually does, like, it usually starts with the player, right? It starts with the player because they have to have enough of a resume for people to care about, right? Like, it can be the greatest card in the world, but if it's from a tertiary set, not like a PMG, not like a credentials, something further down the line, and it's Mario Ellie, right? Like, people aren't going to get excited about that, right? Some people might, but not a lot of people. So it's got to be a player that's going to resonate with people. But I also have a soft spot for kind of that second tier or third tier type of player, right? Yeah. Like, everybody talks about Jordan cards. Everybody talks about Kobe, LeBron, and that's rightfully so. Those are great athletes, ton of support. They've done things that other players haven't done. They have some great cards, but I get more excited about, I'm more of a football guy. So like Jerry Rice is kind of at the top. Barry Sanders is kind of at the top. I still get excited about those guys, but like Isaac Bruce, like somebody that gets me super excited. Kurt Warner, let's just stick with the greatest show on turf. Marshall Faulk, like these are dudes that had legendary careers, give me so much nostalgia because it was, I was a teenager when these guys were in their prime and winning Super Bowls and MVPs. And you can get their cards. You can get some of their best cards for hundreds of dollars. So it's the player. It's got to be exciting enough for people to talk about. But then my favorite type of cards, again, football is a great place to be in with this because there's a lot of football sets and baseball too that are really significant sets and rare sets. But because they don't have a basketball set of that set, it's not as popular. You and I were talking about the 96 Select Certified set.
Yep.
There's no basketball in that. There's no basketball set of that. So it's a little less. Yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit less mainstream, crazy rare set, super significant set because it literally started the rainbow parallel refractor theme, I guess, that we have today. The card that you just showed me that you bought, the 99 Contenders Finesse Gold out of 25, gorgeous card. There's only a football set of that. So, I mean, it's just a lesser known set, super rare. The people that know about it love it. But that also makes it super affordable. You got maybe the best card in that set for a couple grand. I mean, that's amazing. If that was a Jordan, I mean, it'd be a six-figure card. So those are kind of the criteria. It's not really a set criteria, but those are kind of the fundamentals I stick to and kind of work off of. But yeah, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's kind of how I process that.
It makes a ton of sense. I think you're targeting players that, so there's a lot of fans. There's a lot of fans of these players. There's people that follow them as kids or they grew up loving them. They're the hometown heroes. But if they're not in that top tier, and you're right, because I mean, I PC Griffey, and I kind of feel like he's in that top tier. I have a hand like 2 or 3 Kobe cards, and that's a top tier. But the rest of them are David Robinson, and there's a Peyton, and there's maybe a Barry or something. But those guys are all on that next level down where they're collected, but they're not super collected, and so their cards don't carry the same value in those big sets. Even in those big sets, they still do in some sets. They're still. But not comparatively to like a Kobe or a Jordan. So I feel like that's fun. It's a great way to highlight players like that from those sets and from those and in those in that time period too, right? And I think there's a lot of opportunity to sort of get the provenance in a card, like you talked about 96 Select Certified. Well, there's the mirror gold, red, and blue, and that's kind of neat. Like either blue, red, and gold. That hadn't happened before, so there's like this opportunity to collect history in a way. So I think it's exciting. I geek out on it. Obviously, we can see her talk about this for 3 hours and all the cool sets. I've talked about them before, but no recent comps. The newsletter. I subscribe to the newsletter. It's free. It's awesome. If you haven't done it, this is it's going to be kind of a promotional video and commercial here for Nick and his what he does. But I'm someone who's been like consuming it for the past few months, and I am using, and Nick is great to sell with too. It's amazing, super professional. You get great value, you get great rates, all of it. But your No Recent Comps newsletter is really cool. And now we're going to get to the community, but the newsletter. Talk to me about the newsletter. I read it every Saturday morning. It is so cool. But where did that come from?
Well, first off, I appreciate your support, man. It means a ton, and you have been I think a day one subscriber, so I appreciate that. But funny enough, when I really started this back in 2020, when I wanted to go into the business side of this, I just made a website and started a blog. I wanted to just write about cards. That's what I was passionate about at the time, was just doing research and talking about it. So that's kind of my original passion, and I wanted to get back to the writing side of it. I liked the idea of a newsletter because, for one, it kept me on a cadence. Like, okay, it's going to hold me accountable to put this out once a week, for me to dig into cards and do research, something I love, but put it together and make sure I'm putting it out every week. So it kept me in the game, but also kept me doing something I loved. And seeing other people, just hearing you talk about it and how excited you got for it, like, that gets me pumped. That makes me want to do more and put out, a better newsletter every single week. So that's kind of how it started and where it is today. And honestly, it was one of those things where it's like, I never had a financial objective with it. It's always just like, I want to do this and I have fun doing this. And I'm kind of doing it on my own anyways, as far as just looking at these cards and researching them. So why not just share it with people, right? If something comes of it, it does. If it doesn't, then it's still fun for me to do every week. So those type of projects kind of keep my hobby excitement going a little bit more while I do the business side of it. But the newsletter is basically, it comes out every Saturday morning. So it's a great thing to kind of, have your coffee with on a Saturday morning and just kind of, get your dose of the hobby before you do whatever you do on the weekends. But the way I structured it is kind of basically I throw out an article I'm reading that week, whether it could be hobby related, it could be sports related, maybe neither. And kind of, I just tie it in to cards in sports. And I always link these things too, so people can check them out. I highlight a podcast that I listened to recently. It's almost always a sports card podcast, and I just kind of give a brief overview of it. And again, I link the podcast, and then I link an Instagram account that I follow, usually with less than 1,000 followers. I like to kind of find those accounts that I think have really cool cards and just don't have that following yet, and maybe help get them a little bit more exposure. Yeah, there's a copy of the newsletter right there. And then the fourth thing is the questions I'm pondering. So just kind of something I'm thinking about, whether it's sports related or card related, and just kind of like my take on it, and maybe kind of asking readers what their take might be on it. So a lot of it's been football related lately through the playoffs and the Super Bowl. I'm sure it'll kind of adjust as we get out of football season. And then as we get towards the bottom is probably where most people get excited, where I highlight cards. One featured card every week, where it's just kind of the card that kind of I thought had the most fun research behind it, kind of the card that caught my attention the most that week. Like, this was a 2016 Travis Kelce Select Gold Field Level. So what was cool about this card, as an example, it's the first field level select for football, so that's significant. But Kelce was drafted in 2013. So he has a 2013 Select Gold. There was no 2014 Select Football. And then he wasn't on the checklist for 2015 Select Football. So this, on the surface, could look like a fourth year Select Gold for Travis Kelce, but it's really his second. It's a PSA 10 Pop 1, first year field level. Like, that's cool stuff to me, right? Like, that's stuff that you don't know just by clicking on the eBay auction and looking at the card, right? You have to dig to find this stuff. So I try to highlight those things and just kind of share them with people. I always link the card and kind of say when it's going to end. But then under that, I get into 5 more cards that have no recent comps. So no recent comps means they haven't sold for at least 6 months. But it's cards ending that week, usually on eBay or PWCC. That's kind of where I spend most of my time anyways. And I'll talk about the sales history of the cards. I'll try to comp them to other grades of that card, or maybe other players of that card, just to give people an idea of kind of what the market for that card might be. But yeah, I try to keep it unique and highlight cards that I think people are going to be interested in and that I know they haven't seen for a while. So,
I mean, I'm gonna ask you this question just because we always want full transparency for all those folks out there looking for things to say, right?
Mhm.
Are these cards you have listed that you pick, are these cards that you are consigning for other people that you're promoting?
Occasionally, if I think the card is right, like actually in this issue that Marvin Harrison Flair Showcase Legacy 101, that was a consigned card. The Shaq was not. That card right there, that was a consigned card. But I mean, if that wasn't consigned, I would have featured that anyways. That's a sick card, you know, Legacy 101 masterpiece. Like, again, another kind of second tier wide receiver, even though statistically he's one of the best ever. Not a lot of people are showcasing his cards. So cool one to include. The Rock was a consigned card. I think those were the only 2 cards in there that were actually consignments. But for those that don't know, that's first year Topps Chrome Gold refractor. The Rock, you know, he was kind of back in the spotlight recently. I don't know if you follow wrestling or not, but
not really.
Yeah, he's back in the game. But yeah, that Jeter was not a consigned card. So it just depends. Like most weeks, I don't include a card that's consigned, but every now and then I will if it's a card that I think just meets the criteria for the newsletter.
Well, I mean, just for sake of transparency as well, I've probably consigned about 40 or 50 cards with them already, and I haven't had one of them in this newsletter. I don't
Not yet. Not yet. Coming up though. Coming up.
Yeah, right.
You
but
have a
I haven't. I don't know, Nick. I just kind of find it important when I'm talking to somebody. First and foremost, I get paid $0 to do this. I've been doing this for free since day one. I've gotten zero, not a penny, and I do it for fun. And we don't pay anybody to come on here either. But this, I just want to make sure it's understood, because I think a lot of people sometimes go, well, wait a second, what is this really about? Is this helping friends out kind of thing? No, none of my cards have been in there. Yeah, it sounds like one's might be in there, but I've had quite a few and they haven't. I don't take offense to that. I think I like how it is natural and authentic, and that's a good thing. I think that stands to your character and your integrity, and I think that's something that a lot of people people are concerned about, rightfully so, in the hobby space. And I think it's important for people to be holding everybody accountable. So I love talking about that stuff, not to focus on it, but to go, hey, yeah, there might be a card or two in here, but that's not what he's not just using this as a vehicle to highlight cards that people are selling through him, or even his own cards. And some people would say, well, what's wrong with him even doing that? Well, probably nothing really, honestly. If you're using this as a vehicle to promote cards that people are consigning to you, well, that's just good business sense. Right. But it has to make sense too. That it brings validity and integrity to the actual newsletter when you're putting cards on there, just in general, that are, they're on eBay, they're all over. They're not just the PWCC either. So you have really no allegiances there. You're just finding the coolest cards and you're highlighting them, which I can see that that's naturally happening because I've witnessed it myself through working with you. So really cool. The newsletter is cool. So the newsletter sort of is a jumping off point for something even bigger. Well, why don't we talk about that?
Yeah. So we just launched the No Recent Comps online community. So really what this community is it's an opportunity to kind of, what I like to say, kind of turn down the noise of social media. Social media is great, right? Instagram, Twitter, awesome place to see a lot of cards, see a lot of people that are active in the hobby, but it can be very distracting. The algorithms kind of give you things that you might not have came in there for, and can kind of take your attention away quickly from what you came in there for. I mean, I fall victim to it all the time, where I'll say, oh, I want to go in there and check this card that I saw on Dennis's account. I open up Instagram, and 30 minutes later, I'm on this basketball Instagram page, and I don't even remember why I opened the app. It's like, it's great, but it can also be a huge distraction. And we just see a lot of stuff we don't really want to see. And honestly, I'm not sure it's the best for us psychologically. I don't want to get into all of that, but like, I wanted to turn down the noise. I wanted to get into a community with less people, but a higher percentage of people that really share the same interest. Really want to talk about the same type of cards, but also interested in other cards too, right? Like this isn't all No Recent Comps cards. It's a focus on that, but really all collectors are welcome. But really to kind of tune out the distractions and make it more about cards and sports, right? With people that are just interested in those things specifically, but also within the community, you can buy, sell, and trade. So you can post postcards for sale in there, postcards for trade in there. It's pretty clean how you can post. There's different channels for different sports. So it stays pretty organized. Again, you just post the card, how much you're asking for it, and people can reply to you or DM you on the card. And if you sell it, you sell it. If you don't, you don't. You can repost it later. We also offer a middleman service within this. I know kind of dealing with people you don't know yet can be daunting, especially if you're talking about, a couple $1,000s or more. So our middleman service, say you make a deal with John Doe over here that you've never met, but he's in the community. It's a $5,000 card. We can middleman that where, the explanation is in the community, but essentially we take the money, the card gets shipped. We release the money once the card is confirmed shipped. We charge $10 for it. That's it. It's not, a percentage of the sale. It's just a $10 fee. But that, should eliminate the possibility of scamming, which unfortunately scammers find everything. So it's, I wanted to put some protections in place. But again, if you know people, you don't have to use the middleman. Like if you're comfortable with the sale, you can transact that way you normally would off social media. And hopefully as people get to know each other more in the community, they don't need the middleman service, right? So the goal is to kind of give collectors more control back over their buying and selling and trading, and give them a hub of people that are interested in similar cards and transacting with similar cards. And then we're going to add collector perks to the group as well. We already have some. So one of our main collector perk for members of the group is heavily discounted consignment rates with PWCC. When I say heavily, I mean heavily. So all cards under $5,000. If you're a member of the group, you get 93% of the total sale price if you can sign through PWCC. So I know that the buyer's premium gets it confusing for people, but when I say the total sale price, so if the buyer pays $1,000 for the card, so that's all in $1,000, you would get 93% of that. So, just like an eBay sale, if an eBay card sells for $1,000, you get 93%, same comparison, but really strong payout rates there. If it's over $5,000, you get 95% of the sale price. So just those two rates, try to keep it simple, pay out as strong as I can. You can speak to the experience of PWCC, but I try to keep it super clean and organized. Try to keep communication on point. I'm basically the middleman for you guys. So if you can sign through us, you talk to me about whatever you need. You have questions, you talk to me. You have, anything you need, you talk to me. And if needed, I'll talk to PWCC. I'll schedule the cards. I control the payouts. So I'm the one paying you guys out. So there's more flexibility with payouts and all that kind of stuff. But just one of the collector perks that we have now, and we're gonna add more as we go. And we're not gonna charge more for that. We're just gonna add value as we go. And last thing on the group right now, we're offering free 30-day, first 30 days for free for anybody that signs up by March 1st. So about 16 days left on that, but get you a free 30 days. You can cancel anytime. So there's no, financial risk there, but that should give you a pretty good idea of, if the group is valuable for you or not. It's not going to be for everybody, but that at least lets you test the waters, risk-free.
No, it's a great opportunity. I'm testing it out myself because I want to see what it's about. I think as in general in your life, when you put together your list of people that you work with, the people you trust to handle certain things. Like you got your mechanic that you go to, or it's a dealership, the particular dealership that you trust, or you got your plumber. If you're not handy at home, you've got your contractor, your banker, your financial advisor, on and on and on. You have that person you go to, your real estate agent that you trust that can kind of help you navigate the waters of whatever. So, I think in the hobby, it's good to find a person, because I sold on eBay quite a bit. I've gone through ProSteam, I've gone through a lot of places. Nothing against any of that. But, it was just really nice to find somebody that I can go, no matter what, if I have to sell something, I'm just going to send it to Nick. I'm not going to worry about it. I know it's going to get, properly placed, and it's and the PWCC, I guess, Fanatics too, having a piece of that, owning that is going to make it even more valuable. But I think it's just it's nice to just go, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to worry about it. and trust somebody and not have to worry. It's nice, and you know you're not going to be waiting around forever for your payout. Or so and in general, I think it's good to find that person. If it's Nick, great. You know, obviously I'm advocating for him. If everybody already has that person, great. I just think it's important to have that. It's nice to know, okay, here's where I go to sell cards. Here's where I go if I need to liquidate or I have to do something, or I'm saving up for a card and I have to raise capital. You just know where to go. You go to a person you trust. And so, you know, Nick's one of those guys you can trust. I personally vouch for him, but it's good to have that person. I think it's good to find your niche. This is a really cool community, guys. It's going to be neat to meet people in the community that have been reading this newsletter and been focusing on this newsletter, and folks that enjoy and appreciate a lot of the same things. It is kind of neat to have those little niche groups. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not so much segmenting out too much. It's just to find a room where you're comfortable just being yourself in, and you can just talk about all the things you love to talk about. We're not just throwing everything up there all the time. And there's nothing against doing that. It's fun to do that, but it's really fun to engage with people that have the same, like, they enjoy all the same stuff you do. And it's more fulfilling, and it invites more conversations. You learn more about cards, learn more about sets. And that's what we're always trying to do, is have fun with this hobby and learn more about stuff. Because it makes it way more enjoyable when you get to discover something new. So Nick, I appreciate you coming on the show. Again, so we can find, where do you sign up for that? Direct people where, if they're interested in the newsletter, or if they're interested in signing up for the community, where do they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can always go to the website, which is thewarsportscards.com. So you can see my Instagram handle there. It's just exactly like that without the at. Thewarsportscards.com. That right there at the War Sports Cards is my Instagram handle. You can find a link to both the newsletter and the online community there as well. So whichever is easier for you. But yeah, you know, my DMs are always open. If you guys ever have any questions or you know, want to learn more about anything, or just want to talk cards, you know, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to talk, happy to answer more questions, but had a blast hopping on here, man. And really appreciate all your support.
No, you bet. Yeah. Again, like, comment, subscribe below. If you have any questions for Nick, he's going to be back on here. He'll check out the comment section and be able to answer anything. Let's talk. Again, subscribe to this Melted Wax podcast channel. I know I'm on the Sports Dad. You know, subscribe there as well. If you're already here, it's probably because you've subscribed. If you haven't, please do that as well for Dustin. But yeah, go check out my podcast channel at Melted Wax Podcast. You can find me there. It's got the orange and blue of my beloved Boise State Broncos. So go check that out and follow us there, and go sign up for this stuff. No Comps, the newsletter, the community. If you want to do that. Talk to him about consignment if you want to do that. I mean, there's lots of great dialogue that can be had, learn, and grow. Thanks for coming out and watching the show, enjoying the show with us. Thanks, Nick, for being a part of it. And we'll see you guys all later. Happy collecting.